No,
We're
but
getting the live stream going here now, so just a
Okay.
sec.
Don't
That's
worry,
Don't worry.
You have everybody, right?
Yes.
Are we otherwise ready? Yeah, okay. I'm just pulling up the live stream right now, so we'll get. Sorry.
you can let people in, Kenny.
Yes, sorry, thank you. Yes. Thank goodness Cheryl's paying attention. I know, but.
Moody? Mr. Moody.
Mr. Moody. It's Mr. Moody to you. I think we're good. James, who do you have up? Okay. Okay, gotcha. Thank you. Sea Haver. I wondered how you pronounced that. All right, everyone may be seated. Mr. Loomis, you're the state's next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls Joseph Moret.
And have a seat, get yourself comfortable and adjust that microphone and then I'll place you. Okay, there you go. You swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth in that matter?
Yes, I do.
Great, thank you. Why don't you tell us your first and last name, please?
My name is Joe Moret.
Okay. When you're ready, Mr. Loomis.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Moret. Can you tell the jury where you're employed?
I work for the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation Crime Lab.
Can you explain what that is for the jury, please?
It's the lab that tests evidence submitted by law enforcement agencies from across the state. I work in the toxicology and breath alcohol sections.
And so what's your title? with
I
the
am
DCI?
I am a criminalist in the toxicology section.
And how long have you been so employed in that fashion?
I've been a criminalist for a year and a half, and I was a forensic tech for a year and a half before that.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
All right, I'm going to hand you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 21. Do you recognize State's Exhibit 21?
Yes, I do. It is a copy of my statement of qualifications.
For State's Exhibit number 21 into evidence.
Any objection? No objection. 21's admitted.
Mr. Moret, can you give the jury a sense of what your background is, both educationally and work experience that would contain what we see in State's Exhibit 21, but give the jury a sense of your qualifications that allows you to do what you do as a criminalist with the crime lab here in Iowa?
So I attended Central College in Pella, Iowa for 4 years and received a degree in biochemistry. I then worked at a biolab in Eddyville at Ajinomoto for 4 years. I was then hired on at the crime lab. Since then, I've gone through our in-house training course that consists of reading papers and studying materials and presenting my findings to other analysts for peer review. And I've also attended a number of outside external training courses from some of the leading experts in the country on drugs and toxicology.
And do you continue to have those trainings, those educational things on an annual basis as part of what you do?
I try to get to something at least yearly.
Now, you indicated, Mr. Moret, that you're within the toxicology department of the crime lab. Is that right?
Correct.
Can you explain to the jury what you mean by toxicology?
So for toxicology, we're examining blood and urine for the presence of drugs or alcohol.
Now, in this particular case, Mr. Moret, were you asked to examine a specimen of blood that was submitted to the crime lab?
Yes, I was.
Okay. And was that a specimen of blood of Nathaniel Parker III?
Yes, it was.
Now, when you examine specimens, do you prepare a report as part of your examination process?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And did you do so in this case?
Yes.
I'm going to hand you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 17. You recognize State's Exhibit number 17?
Yes, I do.
And what is that?
It is a copy of the report I issued on March 27th of this year.
And is this a fair and accurate copy of your report?
Yes, it is.
State would offer State's Exhibit number 17.
Any objection? No objection, Your Honor. 17's admitted.
Your Honor, can you put the normal up for me, please? Mr. Moret, I'm showing you State's Exhibit number 17. You can either use the screen that's in front of you or the big screen up here. But this is the report that you made for your findings after testing that blood sample.
Correct.
The report would indicate that the item was submitted to you on March 6th of 2022. Is that, or 2023? Is that right?
To our evidence room, yes.
And the item that was submitted is marked as lab number 3 and agency number 15. Is that right?
Correct.
And those numbers that are attached, is that just how you identify what piece of evidence or what it is that you're testing?
Correct.
And the lab number 3, is that the number that the DCI assigns to that item?
The case was submitted by the submitting officer, and that's what number he assigned to this piece.
And the agency number, that's the agency number from the law enforcement agency?
Correct.
And it gives a description of the item that was submitted. Again, that was the blood from Nathaniel Parker III.
Correct.
And so what were your findings when you tested Nathaniel Parker III's blood?
So initially the blood was screened. It was actually screened by a coworker of mine, Stacy Schmeiser, stated right above or stating behind screening results. She tested it for 15 different categories of drugs, and it screened positive for the presence of amphetamines.
And when you say that it was screened, this is what we're looking at, the items that it's screening for here.
Correct.
And the screening process, can you explain that briefly for the jury? What a screening process would be?
We screen using an immunoassay test. It's similar to COVID tests where there are antigens that are made to recognize certain structures. In this case, the drugs that we're looking for. So the amphetamines class will look for any drug in that class. This includes amphetamine, methamphetamine, ecstasy, phentermine, and some other prescription drugs that resemble that structure.
And this screening test, as you noted, indicated that it was positive for amphetamines.
That is correct.
Can you describe for the jury what is it? What are amphetamines?
Amphetamines are a synthetic stimulant. They cause the person who takes them to become excited. It increases their heart rate and makes them act in an increased energetic manner. At higher doses, it can lead to twitching and convulsions and the inability to control your body as you normally would.
Would that include having a lack of judgment?
At higher doses, it can affect your thinking. It can cause aggressive behavior and cause you to be more. Sorry, I'm blanking. Can cause a lack of judgment at higher doses.
Now, after the screening process is done and it indicates that it's screened positive for amphetamines, what's the next process that you go through in terms of testing the blood?
We send it on for a confirmation using a different type of test after that.
And why is that done?
We use two different types of testing to ensure that there's no erroneous results that could be caused by a fluke error. So we're using two different sorts of testing to eliminate any chance of that happening.
And that was done here as well?
Correct.
And so what are those findings? If we move further down in your report, is that what we see here where it says confirmation results?
Correct.
Okay. And is that what you do specifically after it's screened?
I performed it in this case, yes.
Okay. And the confirmation testing that you performed, what did that show, or what were your findings?
We were able to quantify the amount of drug in the blood sample, and we found that there was a concentration of 214 nanograms per milliliter of methamphetamine and 30 nanograms per milliliter of amphetamine.
Now, what is the difference then between methamphetamine and amphetamine?
They're very structurally similar. Amphetamine is actually a metabolite of methamphetamine. So when a drug is ingested, your body begins to break it down. And amphetamine is produced from the consumption of methamphetamine.
Now, the levels that we see here that you noted regarding the amphetamine of 214 nanograms per milliliter, can you quantify that better or describe that better for the jury? What does that mean, or what does that tell you?
So it can tell us what kind of doses might have been ingested to achieve this concentration in the blood.
And so what does 214 nanograms per milliliter tell you regarding ingestion?
So 214 is well above what would be considered a therapeutic dose. If you're taking this drug as prescribed by a doctor, we would expect to see between 20 to 50 on average nanograms per milliliter. A dose of 200 usually indicates abuse of the drug.
And then what about the level of amphetamine of 30 nanograms per milliliter? What, if anything, does that tell you?
This is most likely just from the metabolism of methamphetamine.
So most of what you can quantify or learn is from the methamphetamine level.
Well, both drugs are active and will act on the body. Their methamphetamine is about twice as potent as amphetamine is, but both drugs are going to be acting on a subject.
Did that conclude then your testing of this blood specimen of Nathaniel Parker III?
Yes, it did.
Thank you, Mr. Moret. The state has no further questions at this time.
Any cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Sir, in looking at your results, you said there's a therapeutic level for methamphetamine. Are there any doctors that you know of that prescribe methamphetamine?
Personally, no.
So how could there be a therapeutic level of methamphetamine that a person can have in their system?
Well, methamphetamine is a Schedule II substance, meaning it shows a high risk for dependency and abuse, but it does have some therapeutic benefits. So a more common version of this would be Adderall. Adderall is amphetamine. It's prescribed for ADHD and to manage weight loss as well. So that would be a more common prescription. But since methamphetamine and amphetamine exhibit similar characteristics, it is possible to have a prescription.
Is the name for Adderall methylphenidate?
No, so Adderall is the brand name, and the generic is amphetamine. Methylphenidate's brand name is Ritalin.
And are they similar, the same?
They're similar, but they're not the same.
All right. Now, do you only deal with drugs, or do you also deal with alcohol?
We test for alcohol as well.
Okay, but do you in your job?
Personally, yes.
Okay. So what would be what you would consider according to the speed limit, or not speed limit, but for OWI cases, what would be the legal limit?
For alcohol,
Yes, sir.
0.08 grams per 100 milliliters of blood.
Okay. So someone who would say over 0.2, would that be fairly high concentration of alcohol in their system?
Yes.
Now, I believe you were speaking of some general characteristics of using methamphetamine. Do you recall doing that?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you yourself haven't ever observed Mr. Parker using any type of methamphetamine.
No, I have not.
So you have no idea if the general characteristics apply to him.
Correct.
So these are just could be, but not specific to him.
Yes.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Anything further, Mr. Lewis?
What type of substance is alcohol?
Alcohol is a central nervous system depressant.
And what do you mean by that?
It means that it causes your body to lower all sorts of things. It causes you to be drowsy. It causes your body to just decrease overall in blood pressure, body temperature, things of that nature. So stimulants and depressants are often described as having the opposite of effect on the body as each other.
Thank you, Mr. Moret. Nothing further.
Anything else?
Yes, Your Honor.
Sure.
Does alcohol have any effect, if you know, on bleeding, things of that nature?
I'm not 100% sure on that.
Does it have any effect on your nervous system, like feeling pain, things of that nature?
I believe at higher doses, it can numb some pain.
And that's because it's kind of a sedative.
Correct.
All right, nothing further.
Anything else, Mr. Loomis?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, all right. You're excused. Thank you very much. State's next witness.
The state will call Sabrina Seehafer.
Come on in and have a seat and we'll let you get seated, adjust your chair and the microphone, and then I'll place you under oath. You swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth in this matter?
I do.
And why don't you tell us your full name, please?
My name is Sabrina, Sabrina Seehafer, Seehafer.
Thank you. Mr. Loomis, when you're ready.
Good afternoon. Ms. Seehafer, where is it that you're employed?
I'm employed by the state of Iowa, Department of Public Safety, Division of Criminal Investigations, Criminalistics Laboratory, better known as the DCI Crime Lab.
How long have you been employed with the crime lab?
Almost 15 years.
And can you give an explanation for the jury what the crime lab is here in the state of Iowa?
The crime lab is the only full forensic scientific center for the whole state of Iowa. Specifically, it's the only laboratory that has DNA analysis, toxicology, and certain other disciplines. We cover all disciplines of forensic science in which law enforcement can submit item of evidence in investigations for us to examine for the different disciplines and do scientific testing on.
Is there an accreditation process that the lab has to go through in order to maintain what you do as a laboratory?
Yes.
Can you explain what that process is, or that accreditation process?
Yes, we're accredited by ANAB, which stands for ANSI National Accreditation Board, but it's a set of accreditation standards that company accredits us by the ISO 17025 standards that our laboratory has to meet to confirm that our testing is at the highest level of quality. They come in and do external audits of all of our policies and procedures and do case file review of our testing to ensure that we are doing the highest quality testing possible.
And how often does that accreditation process take place?
We have the full accreditation cycle is a 4-year cycle for the laboratory as a whole. And then they will do some offsite examination of our records on the in-between years.
And so how long have you been a criminalist with the lab? Ms. Seehofer?
So almost 15 years since February of 2009.
And what's your title beyond the criminalist title within the lab itself?
So I'm assigned as a criminalist specifically to the DNA section as my primary assignments, in which I am also the DNA technical leader. I also serve as a member of the crime scene response team.
So when you say that you're a technical leader, can you describe what that means for the jury?
Yes, so I'm the technical leader of DNA. So that means that I have to approve all of our policies and procedures. We're doing all DNA technical procedures within the laboratory. In addition, I run and approve all validations of new chemistry. I would be the one that approve all proficiency testing of all DNA analysts. I also sign off and approve all DNA analyst training in the laboratory to get them online with active casework.
Now, you also indicated that in addition to being a criminalist, that you're also involved in other areas. What were the other areas that you were involved with?
So I'm also a member of the crime scene response team for the laboratory. So that's a group of individuals that are on call on a rotating basis from all different areas of the laboratory, in which we can be called to assist in the document and collection of evidence at different incidences.
So as part of what you do, you actually do get called out to scenes themselves to collect and gather evidence for testing?
Yes, I can.
And so how long have you been doing that part of your assignment with the crime lab?
13 years.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Thank you. Two documents, States Exhibit 19 and States Exhibit number 20. If you'll take a look at States Exhibit 19 first for you. You recognize States Exhibit number 19?
Yes, I do.
And what's
This is a copy of my statement of qualifications that compiles a list of what disciplines I am able to perform testing in at the laboratory, my areas of specialty, my education, any certifications, and all my continuing education courses I've had since I've been at the laboratory.
They would offer States Exhibit number 19 into evidence.
Any objection to 19?
No objection, Your Honor.
19 is admitted.
Can you explain to the jury what your background is, what your qualifications are to do what you do with the crime lab?
So prior coming to the DCI Crime Laboratory, my formal education is a bachelor's in biology from Westminster College in Fulton, Missouri. Then I went to University of Rochester in Rochester, New York, in which I completed a master's and a PhD in biochemistry. Once I completed my PhD, I then was employed by the Iowa DCI Crime Laboratory. Once I was employed by the Iowa DCI Crime Laboratory, I completed the standard training program that is a minimum of 6 months that meets all the guidelines as set forth by the FBI DNA Advisory Board. After I completed that, I also received my personal certification with the American Board of Criminalistics in molecular biology. Once I completed my formal training, then I became an active caseworker and have been doing active casework since.
Now, I want to talk with you about some items that were submitted to the DCI laboratory for testing that are part of this particular case. Did you examine those particular items that were submitted to the crime lab?
I did not.
Is there someone within the crime lab that did test those particular items?
Yes, criminalist Carly Schneider, assigned to the DNA section, did the testing.
And so I'm going to have you take a look at States Exhibit number 20. You recognize States Exhibit number 20?
Yes.
Okay, and what is States Exhibit number 20?
States Exhibit 20 is the statement of qualifications for criminalist Carly Schneider, SCHNEIDER.
And is that a fair and accurate copy of her qualifications?
Yes.
State would offer state's exhibit number 16 into evidence.
No objection, Your Honor.
16, right? You
Or
said,
excuse me, 20.
okay.
My apologies.
That's where you that made me
Still no
pause.
objection.
Still no objections. Yes, 20 is admitted.
And Ms. Schneiders was unable to be here for purposes of testimony. And so you're here in her stead to testify. Is that right?
Yes,
And for purposes of your testimony here this afternoon, have you reviewed her testing and her analysis of the items that were presented to the lab?
yes,
And that allows you to testify as to not only the report that was prepared by her, but the results as well.
yes.
I'm going to hand you what's been marked as state's exhibit number 16. Recognize state's exhibit number 16.
Yes.
What is state's exhibit number 16?
State's exhibit number 16 is a copy of Carly Schneider's report, DNA report that was issued in this incident on June 9th of 2023. It's a 3-page document.
And you've reviewed this report prior to your testimony here this afternoon.
Yes, I have.
And if you reviewed Carly's notes that she might have prepared as part of her testing in preparation for that report as well.
Yes, I have.
At this time, state would offer state's exhibit number 16.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
16 is admitted. Are we going to the Elmo? Okay.
Yes, please. So it's only what's been marked as state's exhibit number 16. And this is the report that was prepared as part of Ms. Schneider's testing. Is that right?
Yes,
And so when we look at this particular report, the first part of this report that we see is the agency that submitted the items for testing. Is that right?
yes. Up in the top left corner, you'll see the submitting agency's information.
And that's the Sioux City Police Department in this case.
Yes, it is.
And then we have a list of items a little further down, kind of in the middle of this first page here. And those items that we see listed down, there's both lab number and agency numbers to those items. Can you just give the jury a sense of what those items mean? What are they?
So these were all the different items of evidence that was submitted by Sioux City PD for examination in the DNA section of the laboratory. So the laboratory assigns its own item number when it's entered and its own case number. The agency item number would be assigned by Sioux City. These items included a brown jacket, a knife wrapped in a red t-shirt, 7 swabs, different swab sets, 4 sets of known buccal swabs, a known blood card, and then black shoes.
So I want to talk a little bit about the process of testing for DNA, just kind of generally speaking, to give the jury a sense of how that is done. When you're testing for DNA, what, if anything, do you need in order to do that testing? And do you understand my question? Let me make it a little more clear. So if you're testing for DNA, do you need someone's known sample to compare it to?
Yeah, so DNA is a comparative science. So our testing for DNA profiles we develop off of items from a scene won't tell me your eye color, your hair color, or who it is. but it's very individualistic to each individual except for identical siblings. But I would only be able to say the DNA profile is male or female, or if I see a mixture of DNA from more than one individual without having any known reference samples. We develop DNA profiles from known reference samples such as known buccal swabs or known blood standards. So those inside buccal cells for buccal samples, they take a cotton swab and collect them. So that's coming from a known source. So we know whose DNA is profile there. Taking a known blood sample from an individual and submitting it to laboratory means when we develop a DNA profile from that known blood sample, then we know that that is the known DNA profile of that individual. And then we can use those knowns for comparison after we've interpreted all the DNA profiles we develop from samples collected from items involved in the incident.
And so in this particular case, when we're looking at what was submitted to the crime lab for testing, the known swabs that we have that were submitted, and there's a few different individuals in which those were submitted. And I want to go through those just for a minute. Lab number 10 was the box containing a buccal swab of Conway Malone. So that would be one of the known samples that you're referring to.
Yes, that's one of the individuals a known DNA profile was developed from.
And then lab number 11, a known buccal swab from Nathaniel Parker Jr.
Yes, that was another sample that we developed a known DNA profile from.
And then lab number 13 from Jeffrey Lee.
Yes, that's another known reference sample we developed a known DNA profile from.
And then lab number 14, the known buccal swab of Nathaniel Parker III.
Yes.
And so when the testing is done, as you indicated, you're taking the other items that you've received and checking to see, well, why don't you explain what that process is for the jury? So you develop the known DNA samples from the buccal swabs that you know of, right? And then what's the process that you go through after that?
So when we examine the case as a whole, we first will get information about a case, bring all the item of evidence into our custody, and then we'll clean our bench area and systematically put a clean piece of butcher paper down, wearing gloves and masks the whole time, and examine each item of evidence systematically. If it's something that we're screening for the presence of a bodily fluid, we'll conduct that screening test, determine if we're taking any samples from those items, put them in an individual little tube, set that aside in a rack, clean the whole bench area, and then proceed to systematically go through all items of evidence. Once we have all the items of evidence examined, taking whatever samples we're going to move on through the DNA process, we will then do different types of extractions. One is a known extraction, which all the known reference samples, known buccal samples, and known blood standards would go through that process. And that is simply think of an extraction as you're trying to separate out the DNA away from the substrate. So think about separating the egg white from the egg yolk. I just need to get the DNA cells, the cells to get the DNA out of, off that substrate. In a different type of extraction, which is very similar, we'll do samples that came from the crime scene or from the items of evidence submitted. And those we will do a very similar separate that. At that point, the samples are batched back. And we do a step that tells us about how much DNA is in each of those tubes, because you can't see DNA by the naked eye. So we need to know about how much DNA is there. Is there going to be enough to develop a DNA profile? Do we need to think about taking an additional sample? Is there any additional sample? Once we have it at that step, all the DNA samples go through a molecular Xeroxing process called polymerase chain reaction, better known as PCR. So we just make multiple copies of the regions of interest called loci or locations of the DNA that we're interested for our human identity testing. We look at 21 different locations and 3 sexing locations in all those samples. They're all in their own individual tube, their own individual slot on the plate, so they're all kept very separate. Once we've done that molecular xeroxing, and I've made millions of copies of the area that I'm interested in for each DNA sample, we then load it on a capillary electrophoresis instrument. Think of this as a long, thin tube that we have a gel through that we separate out the DNA fragments by size. And then we develop a DNA profile from those DNA fragments. To you, it would look like peaks on a graph. To me, it looks like a DNA profile because we get half of our DNA from dad and half of our DNA from mom. If it's a single source profile, typically you would see no more than 2 peaks at any one location. Once we've developed all of our DNA profiles in the case, we will then systematically go in and evaluate the DNA profiles that come from items of evidence that came from the incident or from the crime scene and make determinations on, do we think it is a single source or a mixed DNA profile? Is it interpretable? Do any interpretation that way for, do I need to go back and re-amplify or take another chance at the molecular xeroxing? Do I need to take additional cutting, additional sample? Then we'll prepare a statistic on each of those interpretable portions of the profile or the profile itself that just says how rare or how common that profile is in a relevant population. After all that is done, then we will bring out our known reference samples and see if any of those unknown profiles we've developed within the case are associated to belonging to any of the known individuals in the case. Once we do that, we prepare our case file, write a draft report. The entire case file is reviewed by another qualified DNA analyst. We're 100% tech review in the DNA section. And then they issue, if there's no additional work in that, we issue a report to the findings of the DNA analysis, and then we can be called to court to come testify to those findings.
Now, that process, was that used here in this particular case?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And so I want to go through some of those items that were tested through that process and the results that were found from that process. And the first, if we just start with the first item, lab number 1, agency number 2, the brown jacket with fox fur. You see that there?
I do.
Now that particular item, if we flip over in your report to page 2, I believe is addressed in what's labeled number 1. Do you see that there in the report?
I do.
And so are these the results of the testing of that particular jacket?
Yes, these are the listed results for both screening and for the DNA, the samples taken for DNA for item 1, the jacket.
Now, is there a way for you, even though you didn't test this particular item and you're relying upon the testing done by somebody else, is there a way for you to identify the item itself after the fact that this was the item that was tested?
Yes, every individual in the laboratory that examines an item of evidence will make notations or date initial by the notations with the DCI case number and item number on the item of evidence examined and the date of their examination, their initials. This allows us to identify different items of evidence at a later date, because as you can imagine, with being the only DNA section of the whole state, is that we see multiple coats in a year, multiple shirts in a year. So it's a way for us to identify that yes, is the item of evidence we examined.
What the marks of states exhibit number 31. direct your attention to the bottom. See if you're able to identify this item based on what you see in State's Exhibit number 31.
Yes, I am.
And does that item appear to be the brown coat as listed in the report?
Yes, it is.
And how do you know that?
Your Honor, may I stand up?
Of course.
So as you see on the bottom front of this jacket, there's a little white tag. On that little white tag, I confirm that this is the DCI case number and the item number, item 1, with Carly Schneider's initials and the date she examined the evidence on. She actually has 2 different dates on it because she did an additional examination of it. So this is the way that I can tell that this is the coat that Carly examined in May of 2023.
State what offer State's Exhibit number 31. into evidence.
Any objection to 31?
No, Your Honor.
31 is admitted.
Now, are you able to describe for the jury the process that was gone through to test this particular jacket for any DNA?
Yes.
And can you give the jury an understanding of what that process was for this specific jacket?
So from looking at Carly's report, this jacket would have been laid out and she would have visually looked at for any possible areas that she saw red-brown staining to look for the presence of blood in this case. Her notes indicate in her report indicates that she screening did not indicate the presence of blood on 5 different areas of this jacket. One area did screen test did indicate the presence of blood on that area. So she took a cutting from that area, which was on the front right side chest area, which you should see on that coat, a little hole where she physically took a cutting of the fabric and moved that on for DNA testing. Your Honor, may I step down? This will probably go better if I stand out here.
Do as you need to. You know, I appreciate you asking for permission, but
Well, I'm going to give you State's Exhibit number 31. Can you indicate that area that would indicate the presence of blood that resulted in further testing?
So on the front right side, you can see. It's hard to see, but there's a black circle area in Sharpie, and you can see a little cutting is actually taken out of the fabric. You can see, as I look there, you can see the inner lighter lining through the hole.
And that would have been the area that was cut out for DNA testing,
It is,
because that's the area that's screened for blood.
yes.
Now, we'll come back and talk about that in just a minute, but there were 5 areas screened that you said for blood or for DNA, is that right? Or screened for blood?
So she tested a total of 6 different areas for the presence of blood with screening tests, 5 screen negative for the presence of blood. This one that we talked about with the cousin screen positive.
Are you able to say the other areas that did not screen positive for blood?
Yes, I'm allowed to refer to hers.
If you would please refer to those areas that did not screen positive.
Specifically on item 1, the 5 areas that did not screen positive for the presence of blood were the inside right pocket fabric, the inside left pocket fabric, one area on the front lower left side near zipper, and 2 areas on the front lower right side near zipper. Those areas should also be circled with black Sharpie to denote that those areas were areas of interest. It's just really hard to see on that dark of a coat.
So those other areas were circled in that same black Sharpie to indicate that she screened those for blood.
Yes,
And as I understand it, those areas then again were the left and right pocket, or the inside of the left and right pocket.
yes,
Two areas on the lower left, near the zipper.
2 areas on the lower right side
Lower
near
right.
zipper, and 1 area on the front lower left side near zipper.
Okay.
Is what her notes describe.
Now, the one area of blood that did screen positive, that was then tested for DNA.
Yes, it was.
Okay, and what was the result of that testing?
The DNA profile developed from the cutting from the front right side chest area matched the known DNA profile of Nathaniel Parker III. The probability of finding this profile in a population of unrelated individuals chosen at random would be less than 1 out of 260 septillion.
And so you're confident that the blood that was tested on the outside of that jacket is Nathaniel Parker III's blood?
Yes, the statistic given is telling you how rare that profile is in a population of unrelated individuals. So a septillion is 10 to the 24th, to give you a reference, where a billion is 10 to the 9th.
I want to talk about the testing of item number 2. The knife wrapped in a shirt. You see that there?
Yes,
Can you walk the jury through the testing of that particular item that was submitted to the lab?
so when Carly examined this items, the knife was wrapped in a t-shirt. She would have, once again, cleaned her bench area, put out clean paper, put fresh gloves on, made sure everything was clean, and then systematically examined the knife and the shirt. She took swabs of the entire knife blade and bottom side of the hilt that screened positive for the presence of blood, took a cutting of one of those swabs and took it for the DNA process. She also swabbed the knife handle with 2 swabs and took a portion of the swabs forward for DNA testing of that. The DNA testing on the swabs of the entire knife blade and the bottom of the hilt, the DNA factors detected were just too weak for any conclusive interpretation. That means that we see a few peaks on the graph, but there's not enough peaks there for us to conclusively interpret whose DNA is present and whose is not. So we won't include or exclude anybody as contributing that DNA to the knife blade and the bottom side of the hilt. The DNA factors detected from the swabs of the knife handle were also too weak for conclusive interpretation. So once again, saying we see a few peaks on our graph, showing that we do have some DNA present, but it's too weak for us to say whose DNA is present on those items.
And so regarding the knife itself that was tested, the testing shows that there was blood on the blade of the knife, but you're unable to say whose blood it is.
Yes, our screening tests, which are presumptive screening tests, did indicate the presence of blood, but we cannot say whose DNA was left on the knife.
And then for that of the handle, it was too weak again for conclusive interpretation.
Yes, so there is some DNA present on the knife handle. We just can't say whose DNA is present.
Now regarding the shirt that the knife was wrapped in, what was the process of testing used in that particular item?
So based on review of Carly's notes, she looked at the knife or the shirt as it laid. And so it was inside out. And so she saw a large red brown stain on the front inside of the shirt. She screened that area for the presence of blood. It screened positive. And then she took a cutting from that inside front abdomen area and developed a DNA profile for that.
Now, again, like the jacket, are you able to identify that shirt later, even though you are not the one who did the testing based on just like the jacket, some sort of identification mark on that item?
Yes, I would be able to.
In the Kansas State's exhibit number 22. Are you able to identify that?
Yes, I am.
And is that a shirt that was tested as part of the results that we see in this exhibit for the report?
Yes, it is. I can tell that because once again, if you see on the inside neckline area, there is the white sticky note or sticker that has been stapled on that shows our DCI case number, showing item 2.2 with Carly's initials and the date she examined it, May 8th of 2023.
Statement officer states exhibit number 22.
Any objection to 22?
No objection, Your Honor.
22 is admitted.
And I have to hold on to that. It's just you identify from that exhibit where the cutting was taken off the shirt in order for there to be DNA tested on that.
Yes, I can.
Can you show that to the jury, please?
Yes, as you can see with this item, the black Sharpie marks show up better. This circled area is the area that she was indicated that she screened positive for the presence of blood, marking her markings 2.2.1. And then, as you can see with the coat, there is a little square cutting taken out of that same area. And that would have been the little cutting that she put in her tube to proceed with the DNA process.
So that DNA testing resulted in showing what?
The DNA profile developed from the cutting from the inside front abdomen area matched the known DNA profile of William Harlan Jr. The probability of finding this profile in a population of unrelated individuals chosen at random would be less than 1 out of 60 septillion.
And again, you're confident that the blood found on that particular shirt is the blood of William Harlan Jr.?
Yes, the DNA profile is the DNA profile of William Harlan Jr.
Now, in your experience, both as a criminalist within the lab and your involvement as a crime scene response team member, is it possible to transfer blood from the knife, to a t-shirt or a piece of fabric if the knife was wiped off using the t-shirt?
Yes, it's possible.
If an individual attempted to clean blood off a knife with fabric using water, is it possible to transfer blood to the t-shirt?
Yes, it's possible when cleaning an item with liquid to move the DNA from one item to another.
If an individual wrapped the red t-shirt when it was wet around the knife with blood on it, can the blood soak or transfer from the knife to the shirt?
Yes, that's possible.
In your experience as an examiner of DNA and looking for DNA, have you previously tested knives in other cases that doesn't always result in a DNA profile?
Yes, I have.
Can you explain that for the jury?
So depending on what the knife looks like, or that the knife is one hard surface. So as blood dries, blood on hard surfaces can flake off and not be present on the hard surface anymore, unlike a fabric that would wick the blood stain in and lock the DNA. In addition, if an item of evidence has DNA deposit on it and then is pulled through, such as a knife stabbed through a body or layers of fabric, you could have a squeegee effect where the majority of the blood and DNA may be squeegeed off the knife if there's not a considerable amount of blood on the knife. So we have had knives that screen positive for the presence of blood, but there's just not enough DNA present for us to develop a DNA profile.
So if a knife was stabbed through multiple layers of clothing, that could explain why there isn't a DNA profile on the knife.
Yes, the liquid part of the blood could soak into the fabric, or could be, some of it could be removed as it comes out of the fabric.
And that's what you're referring to as the squeegee effect?
Yes, so kind of think of it as you put something on your windshield and use your windshield wipers. As the windshield wiper goes, it moves. It doesn't leave, say, the bird poop on your window in the same spot. It kind of moves it off. That's that effect can happen with items of evidence such as a knife.
Talk about item number 4. In reference to item number 4, what was tested here for purposes of this report?
Item 4 had 2 different swabs located as coming from the same area. One of those swabs did not screen. The screening did not indicate the presence of blood on one of the swabs, so no DNA testing was done on that swab. Screening did indicate the presence of blood on one swab from the back passenger inside frame. Once again, a cutting of that swab was taken forward to the DNA process and a DNA profile was developed.
And did that match with any of the known profiles developed?
Yes, the DNA profile matched from the swab of the back passenger inside frame, matched the known DNA profile of William Harlan Jr. with the same probability previously stated.
And so you're confident the blood, that particular blood swab, was that of William Harlan Jr.?
Yes.
Moving down to number 5, the swab of Nathaniel Parker III's right hand. What was the testing process of that particular swab?
Once again, Carly started with her screening test. Screening indicated the presence of blood on the swabs from the right hand. She took a cutting of those swabs and developed a DNA profile, and that DNA profile matched the known DNA profile of Nathaniel Parker III, with the probability of finding this profile in a population of unrelated individuals chosen at random would be less than 1 out of 260 septillion.
And again, you're confident that the blood swab of that particular item is that of Nathaniel Parker III?
Yes, the DNA on that swab matches the known DNA profile of Nathaniel Parker III.
Item number 6, the swab of marker number A from the scene submitted by the Sioux City Police Department. What was the testing process of that particular swab from marker number A?
Screening indicated the presence of blood on those swabs from marker A. A cutting was taken, and the DNA profile developed from that matched the known DNA profile of William Harlan Jr. The probability of finding this profile in a population of unrelated individuals chosen at random would be less than 1 out of 60 septillion.
And you're confident that that blood from marker number A is that of William Harlan Jr.?
The DNA profile, yes, from that swab matched the known DNA profile of William Harlan Jr.
So item number 7, swabs from the front blade of the knife. Are these the swabs that were submitted separately by the Sioux City Police Department?
Yes, they were.
And these are different than swabs that Carly would have taken in her testing, in her other testing, is that right?
Yes, all of Carly's swabs that she took would have been listed under the item of evidence she took them from. So in that case, that would be item 2.
And so what does the screening and what does the testing show of this item number 7?
Screen did not indicate the presence of blood on the swabs from the blade near the tip. And she did go ahead and take a cutting because this was a swab of a knife on for DNA process, but no DNA profile was developed in this case. So unlike some of our results, there were 2 weeks where I see a few peaks on my graph. There was no peaks developed in this attempt to do DNA.
Then item number 8.
Screen did
Go ahead.
Screen did indicate the presence of blood on the swabs of the blade near the handle. Once again, Carly went ahead and took a cutting of this and proceeded with DNA, but no DNA profile was developed from that cutting of the swabs.
And again, that was a swab that was submitted separately by the Sioux City Police Department for testing.
Yes, it was.
Go to item number 9. Swab from the bathroom door. What were the results of that particular testing?
Screen indicated the presence of blood on the swabs from the bathroom door. When DNA was attempted, DNA analysis was attempted on that item, a cutting of the swabs, the DNA factors detected were just too weak for any conclusive interpretation. So once again, we see a few peaks on our graph, but not enough to include or exclude anybody to those few peaks.
Then item number 12. Swab from the rear back middle seat. What was the testing? What did the testing show on that particular swab?
Screen did not indicate the presence of blood from those swabs. Carly did take a sample of this item and moved it forward for DNA analysis. However, no DNA profile was developed from that cutting.
And then the last item, item number 16. Black Timberlands, those ended up not being tested, is that right?
Yes, no examinations were performed on those black Timberlands.
Now, as you understand it, that was the testing that was performed by Ms. Schneider's on this particular case with the items that were submitted to her.
Yes, all of her testing would be included in the full body of that report. So any DNA profiles developed or any screening would be indicated there.
Thank you, Ms. Seehofer. The state has no further questions at this time.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Could I approach for the defendant's exhibits?
Oh, of course.
Thank you.
Of course.
Ma'am, could I hand you what's been marked as Defense Exhibit 102 and see if you can identify it?
Yes, I can.
Okay, could you go ahead and tell the jury what that?
Defense Exhibit 102 is a copy of the DCI DNA report issued by Carly Schneider on June 9th of 2023.
So is that the same report that you've just been speaking of?
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right. Could I have you go ahead and look at page number 1 with me, and could you identify what is marked by lab number 17?
Yes, that is the known bloodstain card, which was used to develop the known DNA profile of William Harlan Jr.
Okay. And then lab number one was the brown jacket with faux fur, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, and going to page 2, there was a kind of a 2-part, I guess, report on for number 1. Would that be correct?
Yes, there was an additional sample, DNA sample tested.
Okay, and where was that tested?
So Carly collected swabs from the inside wrist cuffs to attempt to get skin cell DNA from the coat jacket and develop DNA profile from there.
Okay, was she able to determine that there was some DNA in it?
Yes, she was, sir.
But she was not able to single that out.
No, she developed a mixture of multiple individuals on that was too complex for any interpretation.
Okay. And then could I have you go back to the first page, please?
Yes, sir.
Thanks. Anywhere within those 17 items that's listed there, any of those labeled any drains?
Are you talking like a swab of a drain, like from a bathtub or a sink?
Yes, I was just wondering if any of those things that are listed, like a back middle seat, bathroom door, are any of those labeled with being drains?
No, there are no evidence swabs collected listed as coming from a drain or any collection of drain material listed.
Okay. Now, do you recall when you were speaking about the brown coat? That you recall when you about that?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay. So I believe the first thing you said that she would have done was laid it on that butcher paper. Would that be correct?
Yes, she would have laid it on clean butcher paper down.
And then she would have looked for anything at all that looked like blood.
Yes, she went through and would have systematically circled different areas of interest, and she did look at 6 different areas of interest for her that she took a further examination of.
And so if she would have noticed anything around the right hand pocket and jacket around the right part of that, she would have then looked at that, correct?
Yes, and she actually did examine and attempt to screen an area inside the inside right pockets.
That came back negative for blood.
Yes.
Now, in your experience, does a knife that is washed have less blood on it than a knife before it?
Yes, a knife that is washed would have less DNA or blood on it than a knife that is unwashed, they both have equal stains on them.
Okay. So the knife before it was washed, would you say it'd be more likely to pass on any type of blood before it?
It would be more likely, yes, with the qualifier that it would be even more likely if the blood was liquid.
Okay. So if it was a freshly used knife, would that more likely be to pass on blood than say one where it had dried?
Yes, you would have the possibility of leaving a stronger amount of blood behind because the liquid blood could soak into the fabric.
Okay. And conversely, could an item of clothing that had blood on it put blood onto a knife?
It's possible, yes.
Now, I believe you said the red shirt if you do recall your testimony about that.
Yes, we talked about the red shirt as item 2.
And so the blood stain, I believe you said was on the abdomen area.
Yes, from Carly's notes and from physically looking at it, it's on the inside of the t-shirt in the front and abdomen area, sorry.
So if I was carrying someone and they had blood on them, would maybe we expect that to be on the abdomen of my shirt?
Yes, if you come into contact with something that has blood on it as you're carrying it and it contacts the front abdomen area of your shirt, the stain could transfer to that shirt.
Okay. Now, what percentage of the work that the DCI crime lab does, do they do for law enforcement?
All of our initial requests typically come from law enforcement agencies. However, we have, so a large percentage would be that. I can't give an exact number, but in my career, I have done additional testing at the request of defense attorneys or defendant. Sometimes they choose, instead of to ask our lab to do additional testing, to send it to a different private DNA laboratory. But I have tested stuff for other parties.
Okay. Thank you. If I would have you look at page number 2, I believe it's number 12 toward the bottom.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So in considering everything that's in the report, is that the only sample that was taken from the back seat that you saw listed?
There were 2 items taken from, I guess I don't know where item 4 was taken from, but the only swab listed is from the side of the back middle seat is item 12. Item 4 is listed as from the back passenger area inside frame. So I don't know how close to the seat that was collected.
All right, so, but the only one that lists something that says seat is that.
Yes.
And that one came back with what type of result?
Screen did not indicate the presence of blood and no DNA profile was developed.
Now, is blood a substance that can freeze?
Yes, it's a liquid and can freeze similar to water.
And does it also have some other properties besides being able to freeze? Can it also become more solid? I don't know how better to say. Let me try to say that better. Can it coagulate?
Yes, unlike water, blood can coagulate because it has cells inside the blood that, as a part of our own body's self mechanism to heal ourselves, it triggers those specific cell types to actually clot and coagulate, or basically make a chunk of the blood to stop further bleeding.
And thank you. I believe that's it. Thank you. Thank you. And then I would offer exhibit 102, Your Honor.
So I'm clear, is 102 the same as the
It
state's?
is.
Okay. Just wanted to be clear. So it's the same as state's exhibit
16, Your Honor.
16. So it's admitted as 16. It can come in now as 101, but they are the same report.
102, sir.
Excuse me, 102. Yeah, I'm sorry. Look, yep, sorry, 102. Thank you. It's admitted now. Mr. Loomis, any redirect?
I don't believe so, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Ma'am, your excuse. Thank you very much. Yeah, just leave her there. It's good. And so, should we take about a 10-minute break quick, or is your next witness here?
I'm not sure if Dr. Thompson is here. I need to check on that. So it
Okay,
would be-
let's go ahead and take a short break then, and keep in mind the admonition I've previously given you. We'll take a short break and then we'll come back with the doctor. James, where does that leave you? Do you have?
So I can go on that.
Okay. Gotcha. Just, that's all I was wondering. So thank you. Yes. Yes. See whether or not that is.
I didn't check that one.
Like, it's about the only thing that would slow us down. So. Getting back into your. Yeah. Yeah. I heard from the career planning or career services office at USD Law. Got an email today and I responded to her. She wanted Jennifer's email address because she said, I have current students interested in internships and I have postgraduate students that they're looking for work. She said, I've worked with she called it, the assistant, well, I think she called it the assistant state's attorney's office, but that's how they call it, South Dakota. And she said, but I haven't with the public clearance office. And I said, here's Jennifer's email, start there. Well, if we can get a practicum started across the street, so to speak, it could turn into a little bit of a feeder, so hopefully that'll get us going in a good direction. I understand. Feels cooler in here, finally. Well, maybe on your side, whatever it is, okay. Maybe I was just warm, I don't know. Between Cheryl and I don't ever, I don't get cold very often, so I oftentimes leave my coat at home. People give me grief when they come in the building. I'm okay, where's your coat? I say, home, because I don't need one today. So I'm hot all the time, it seems, so. And my furnace runs at a pretty high rate apparently, so. When I'm comfortable, Cheryl's cold. Oh, we sleep better at night. I do. Yeah, that is a little chills. Kind of like I gotta dress up to go to bed. Yeah. Yeah, I know. You just grab an extra blanket. Yeah, sure. Just takes a little longer to get it warm under the covers. Did you see James out there? Has he got his doctor yet, or maybe he doesn't? I don't know. Nice. How about you?
Yes.
Do you know? Did you see James out there? Does he have his?
No, James is not there.
Well, maybe they're up in the office.
Who was?
His wife is there?
Yeah. She looked familiar and approached me.
I don't know if I know.
I asked her if she was looking for somebody. She said, yeah, please. I could have thought you were familiar.
I don't know.
See why.
All right.
Mom's there. Sorry. I failed. I'm sorry. Court attendant Dale there.
Are we good to go? Great, great. All right. Go ahead and let the folks back in.
With the jury in?
Just a second. You can get him out of this.
Bill's probably in. Nope. just- This is who lost it. Oh, yeah.
You got it in you. I just wanted to. I knew you'd catch it.
Oh.
Yeah, no, of course. No, I understand.
Okay.
What's that?
I saw it. Thanks, Ben.
All right, everyone may be seated. Mr. Loomis, you want to go ahead and secure your next witness?
Yes, the state calls Dr. Jonathan Thompson.
I'm going to have you go ahead and take a seat and adjust the microphone, and I'll place you under oath after we do that, so that. Sounds great. All right. I swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth in this matter. I do. Pull that microphone down a little bit better. There you go. Thank you, Mr. Loomis. When you're ready, you may begin.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Dr. Thompson.
Good afternoon.
Can you tell the jury where it is that you're employed, doctor?
I'm employed at the Iowa Office of the State Medical Examiner, which is located in Ankeny, Iowa, which is a suburb of Des Moines.
And what's your position with them?
I'm the Deputy State Medical Examiner
How long have you been with the medical examiner's office?
since December of 2008.
And how long have you been the deputy state medical examiner?
Since the fall of 2016, so 7 years.
Are you an actual medical doctor
Yes, sir.
as a profession?
Yes, I am.
And what certifications do you have as a medical doctor?
I have a Bachelor of Science degree. I received that from the University of Iowa. I then went to medical school, so I'm a physician. I went to medical school at the University of Iowa. Following medical school, I did something called residency training, which is essentially on-the-job training in a field of medicine called pathology. I did that at the University of Minnesota. And then following pathology training, I did a 1-year subspecialty training in a field of pathology called forensic pathology. So it's 13 years of training after high school. I'm triple board certified. I'm board certified in anatomic pathology, clinical pathology, and forensic pathology.
Okay, so that was a lot, Dr. Thompson. What is the study of, what's pathology? Can you explain that to the jury?
Pathology is simply the study of disease. Most pathologists that you'll encounter will be what are called surgical pathologists. So if you've ever had surgery and something's taken out of your body, like a mole or appendix or maybe a tumor, that piece of tissue goes to a surgical pathologist. They look at it under the microscope and give it a diagnosis. So it's either cancer or infectious or something not that big at all. So that's most pathology, the study of natural disease.
Now, you indicated that you have some certifications both in anatomical, clinical, and forensic. So what is anatomical pathology?
Anatomic pathology includes the study of surgical pathology. So I also did training in surgical pathology. It includes cytopathology, which is the study of cells like pap smears. If somebody sticks a needle into the body and a mass and sucks that tissue out, the cytopathologist looks at those cells. And then it also includes autopsy pathology, which was kind of my specialty. That's anatomic pathology.
And what about clinical pathology?
Clinical pathology is more of the microbiology, which is a study of infectious agents, toxicology, which is a study of drugs, chemistry, which would be like your electrolytes, sodium, potassium, chloride. It includes genetics, and then also kind of a more emerging field called molecular pathology, which is kind of the study of gene abnormalities.
And forensic pathology, what's forensic pathology?
Well, forensic pathology is what I do every day. That is the specialty that deals with sudden unexpected death when people are in otherwise good health. So if a young person suddenly collapsed on a basketball court, we would investigate that death. And then the forensic pathologist's real specialty involves the identification and interpretation of traumatic injuries. So we examine things like gunshot wounds, stab wounds, bruises, contusions, and then we come to a hypothesis of how those occurred.
And so the different certifications that you have, Dr. Thompson, both in anatomic, clinical, and forensic, those are in addition to just your underlying training to be a medical doctor in of itself?
Yes.
Okay. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Dr. Thompson, I'm going to hand you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 18. You recognize State's Exhibit number 18?
Yes, I do.
What is?
This is my resume.
The state would offer State's Exhibit number 18.
Any objection?
No objection.
18's admitted.
Dr. Thompson actually sets out your qualifications that you went into here this afternoon, this jury.
Yes.
Dr. Thompson, you used a term there as part of what you do with the state medical examiner's office in regards to conducting autopsies. And is that part of what you do with the state medical examiner's office?
Yes.
Can you explain what an autopsy is for the jury?
An autopsy is simply the examination of a body after somebody has died. I like to think of it as being broken up into 3 parts. The first is the external examination, where we simply look at the outside of the body, and we document essentially everything we see. We'll document height, weight, hair color, eye color, scars, tattoos, and then any type of injuries that we see. The second part is the internal examination. That's where we open up the body and we look at the internal organs. And we look at every organ from the brain down to the pelvic block, which would include things like the bladder, the prostate gland, the uterus. So that's the internal examination. And when we do the internal examination, not only do we look for traumatic injuries, but we also look for natural diseases as well. So heart disease, liver disease, brain disease. And then the third part of the examination is the toxicology studies, which is the drug and alcohol studies. And we do that on every single test, every single autopsy that we do, even if the cause of death is obvious.
What's the purpose of conducting an autopsy? Why do you do it?
For forensic autopsies, the primary purpose is to determine cause and manner of death, and then also to collect any evidence that's on or inside the body. So the cause of death is why the person died. That would be things like gunshot wounds, stab wounds, heart disease, drug overdose, and then the manner of death are the circumstances surrounding the death. And in Iowa, there's 5 manners of death: natural, accident, suicide, homicide, and undetermined. So the primary purpose of an autopsy is to determine cause and manner of death, and then also to collect evidence.
Dr. Thompson, did you have occasion to conduct the autopsy of William Harlan?
Yes,
And do you recall when it is that you have performed your autopsy on him?
yes, if I could refer to my autopsy report.
Yes, please do so.
The autopsy was performed in February 26th of 2023.
Now, you briefly described that during the course of an autopsy, there's both the external, the internal, and then the toxicology that's performed on the individual. In terms of the process as a whole, do you prepare a report after that autopsy is conducted?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and does that report contain all of your findings from the autopsy?
Yes, it does.
Okay, and did you do or prepare a report of Mr. Harlan's autopsy?
Yes, I did.
I'm going to hand you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 15. Do you recognize State's Exhibit number 15?
Yes, I do.
And what is?
This is my autopsy report from Mr. Harlan.
That's an accurate copy of that autopsy report, Dr. Thompson.
Yes, it is.
State would offer State's Exhibit number 15 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
15 is admitted.
Dr. Thompson, is it always the case that when you initiate the autopsy or conduct the autopsy that you always begin with the external examination of the body first?
Yes,
Okay, and then from there you move to the internal examination portion of the body?
yes.
Okay, and as you're working your way through this process, how is it that you document your findings? Is there a way that you do that?
We document our findings with simply a pen and a piece of paper. We have body diagrams that we use to document the injuries, where they're located. And then we also document the injuries, are basically our findings with photographs as well. So it's a combination of an autopsy report produced and photographs.
Now, as part of your autopsy of Mr. Harlan and your findings, were photographs taken of his body?
Yes,
I'm going to hand you what's been marked as State's Exhibits 32 through 38 and have you take a look at those photographs. You recognize those photographs, Dr. Thompson?
yes, I do.
And are those photographs that were taken part of you documenting the autopsy performed on Mr. Harlan?
Yes,
And these are fair and accurate copies of how his body looked.
yes, they are.
The state would offer State's Exhibits 32 through 38 inclusive.
All right, any objection to the admission of those exhibits?
No objection to those, Your Honor.
Then they will each be admitted.
Just generally speaking, Dr. Thompson, when you you began the autopsy of Mr. Harlan, Will you talk about the external examination and what you observed during the external examination of Mr. Harlan's body?
Yes, so Mr. Harlan, when he was received, he was received without clothing items. I don't completely know why, but oftentimes that's because the clothing has been removed by medical personnel to perform things like CPR surgery on the individual. He also had some medical intervention on him. So after he was injured, he was taken to a local hospital where he eventually was pronounced dead. He also had some what I call sharp force injuries, which are just any injury caused by sharp force instrument that were present as well.
And I want to talk about those injuries that you observed during the external examination of Mr. Harlan's body. But as you understand it, Mr. Harlan died in February of 2023,
Yes,
February 24th of 2023.
I believe so, yes.
And when you're examining, or when you examine Mr. Harlan's body, do you document those particular sharp force injuries that you noted?
Yes.
Okay, and how do you document those?
We document that with our autopsy notes that we have at the time of autopsy, and then also with photographs as well.
Are they labeled in any way for you to identify which one you're referring to?
I like to label them. I randomly label them with letters starting with A and then proceeding to however long, however many injuries there are. That just helps me when I'm referring back to my autopsy report to know which injury I'm referring to. And I think it also helps attorneys, law enforcement officials, and sometimes jurors also know what injury I'm referring to.
Is there anything beyond the labels themselves? Is there any other meaning attached to the labels?
No, they're just completely random, and they're not implying the order of injury.
And so in your report, states exhibit number 15, Your Honor, if you could put the only up for me, please. The first page of your report in states exhibit number 15 just indicates that this is the autopsy. And then as we move down page number 1, the pathologic diagnoses, what are you referring to, or what are you setting out here on the first page of your autopsy report, Dr. Thompson?
That's just a basic outline, and that kind of summarizes everything that's within the autopsy report itself.
So these are the findings, your findings that you made during the course of your autopsy?
Yes, and that I always include injuries. So in this case, there's sharp force injuries. I'll include natural diseases if there's natural diseases. And then I include toxicology studies as well in the outline.
And so the first one that you have labeled is sharp force injury of chest, wound A. And then under Roman numeral 1, which is wound A, you have A, B, C, and D. What are you setting forth there in A, B, C, and D, Dr. Thompson?
A, B, C, and D are kind of the basic things I document with every sharp force injury. I always document where the entrance is on the body. And then B includes the pathway. So what structures did the injury go through? C includes the depth. So how deep did the wound go into the body? And then D is a very simple direction. The direction is always given with the person in what's called the standard anatomic position. So they're standing upright with their arms by their side. So it's just like front to back, right or left, or up or down.
And so let's talk about that first sharp force injury labeled wound A, using some of the photographs that you looked at just a moment ago, Dr. Thompson. The first is states exhibit number 32. So we're looking at state's exhibit number 32 with the marking of A on it, and that's the wound that we're referring to here, Dr. Thompson.
Yes,
State's exhibit number 33. Another photograph of that wound,
yes,
and then state's exhibit number 34. Close-up of wound A.
yes.
And so when you look at wound A and you examine it, what did you find in terms of that particular wound?
Again, referring to my autopsy notes, and this, I'm just reading it from the outline. It enters in the upper left chest, so we're looking in the left chest area of Mr. Harlan and kind of the upper front left chest. It simply goes into his what's called the pectoralis muscle, which is your muscle of the chest, and it extends to a depth of 3 centimeters, which is probably just a little over an inch. And then as far as the direction, it goes downward and then slightly from Mr. Harlan's front to his back, and then what's called the sagittal plane. So it doesn't really deviate right or left. It simply goes straight down.
When you're examining a wound such as wound number A that we see in state's exhibit 34, you classify it as a sharp force injury. Is there any way for you to determine what made that particular injury to Mr. Harlan?
No, other than the instrument has a sharp edge on it.
Is that the most definite that you can say regarding what was used to make this injury?
Yes.
Is there any way for you to manipulate it to try and get an indication or further indication about the type of instrument that was used?
I do manipulate it. I'll take the wounds and I put them back together. And then I will, when I do that, sometimes you get some suggestion that one edge is squared and one edge is pointed, which some people will come to the conclusion that, well, that must be a single-edged instrument. I document whether it's a straight edge or a pointed edge, but the problem is I'm manipulating it. And so sometimes you can just manipulate it to the point where it looks like you have a squared edge and a pointed edge. So in my autopsy report, I state whether it has a squared edge or a pointed edge, but that doesn't mean that the instrument that was used to injure the person has one squared edge and one pointed edge.
Did you document anything in regards to wound number A?
And if I could refer to my autopsy, I'm sorry, overspoke.
Yes, please go ahead. And let me know what page you're referring to, Dr. Thompson.
Yes. On my autopsy report, there's a title called Evidence of Injury, and this is on page 4 of 8. After wound A, which is what we're talking about, I state reapproximation of the wound margins, which just means I'm putting the margins of the wound together. Demonstrates a pointed edge at the 1 o'clock position. So if you're looking at it, the upper part of the wound would be the 1 o'clock. It's like a face of a clock. Demonstrates a pointed edge at the 1 o'clock position and a roughly squared edge at the 6 o'clock position, which is the bottom portion. So when I put the margins together, one edge looked pointed and one edge looked squared.
But what are you confident in saying medically regarding that particular wound, Dr. Thompson?
I'm confident in saying that's a sharp instrument that caused that wound.
Was there anything else of note regarding wound A that hasn't already been discussed, Dr. Thompson?
No.
Now, in Roman numeral number 2, if we go back to the front page of your autopsy report, the sharp force injury of chest, wound B. I'll show you state's exhibit number 33. Documenting wound B And then states exhibit number 35. Photo just of wound B. What did you take note of regarding this particular sharp force injury to Mr. Harlan, Dr. Thompson?
And again, just referring to my autopsy report, this is all on the outline on page 1 of 8 under Roman numeral 2. The entrance is in a similar location. It's on the upper left chest area of Mr. Harlan. That wound also goes into a muscle of the chest called the pectoralis muscle. The depth for that wound is 1 centimeter, which is about the width of your pinky. And then the direction is in the same direction as wound A was. It's downwards from Mr. Harlan's front to his back, and then in the what's called the sagittal plane. So it doesn't deviate right or left. It simply goes straight down.
Now regarding wound B, did you reapproximate that particular wound as well, like you did with wound number A or wound A?
I believe so. I'll kind of check into my. I did not reapproximate that wound B.
So is there anything else that you noted regarding wound B on Mr. Harlan?
No.
So if we refer back to your report on page number 1, sharp force injury of chest wound C, what did you take note of regarding that particular injury, Dr. Thompson?
This wound was also located on the upper left chest area of Mr. Harlan. This was more in the left armpit area. The armpit is also called the axilla. This one is a little bit deeper than the other ones. This one also goes through the left chest muscle or the pectoralis muscle. It goes through the left lung, a portion of the left lung called the left upper lung lobe, and then it penetrates into the aorta, which is the major blood vessel that runs through your body. And it comes from the heart, and then it feeds blood to the entire rest of the body. That resulted in blood within the left chest cavity, which is the cavity where the lung sits. That blood total at the time of autopsy was 800 cc's. So like a can of pop, like a 12-ounce can of pop is about 355 cc's. So it's a little over 2 of those cans of pop. Now he also had treatment at the hospital, and they drained some blood at the hospital. So he would have had probably more blood at the time of injury. His left lung collapsed. So normally the lung is like an inflated balloon. And if air or if fluid gets around the lung, it will collapse. And then there was also blood in the airways just because the lung was injured. And the total depth of that wound is 13 centimeters. So 15 centimeters is 6 inches or a half a foot. So this is slightly less than 6 inches in depth. And the direction for that wound is from Mr. Harlan's left to his right. It's slightly from his front to his back, and then it is slightly downward.
Dr. Thompson, the 13 centimeters that you referred to, you indicated that it's in relation to how many inches is it? What's the relation between those two?
15 centimeters is about 6 inches. So it's slightly less than, it might be around 5 inches, 5.5 inches.
So if we are using your body, for example, to try and judge the depth of that particular wound, can you use your body to kind of show the jury how deep that wound would have penetrated into the body?
Yeah. So the aorta comes off the heart, and it comes off kind of in the middle of the body. And then it comes up, and then it loops around, which is called the aortic arch. And then it extends just to the left of the spine. So you can actually feel your spine is in the back. That's those little bony things that stick out. And the aorta just travels, it's actually attached to that spine. It just travels to the left of that spine area. So the injury in this case started in the armpit area and then traveled from the armpit area to that aorta. So, somewhere around that distance.
And so that particular wound C that we're referring to, when you say that it would have penetrated the lung or the left upper lung lobe, where would that be on your body?
So the left lung has two lobes. There's a lower lung lobe and then an upper lung lobe. And the lung is actually fairly large. It goes from the bottom of where your ribs are located up to the top of your ribs. So the whole left lung is about that width. And then the left lung just covers most of the upper portion, and the lower lung covers most of the lower portion of the chest.
So what causes the lung to
A couple things. First of all, blood accumulating in the chest cavity would. So if there's this fluid surrounding this thing that's normally inflated by air, that water pressure can cause it to compress. And then also you can get air that comes into that chest cavity because there's a defect in the chest wall. Air can also come in, and that air pressure can also cause the lung to compress.
If Mr. Harlan was sitting upright and would have received that wound, does the blood fill into the chest cavity from bottom up?
It would, yeah. So blood has a mass, and so it gets pulled to this area of the chest cavity that's closest to the surface of the earth. So if you're sitting upright and blood is accumulating within the chest cavity, it's going to start off down here at the base of the chest cavity and eventually fill up until it got to that defect, and then it could drain out at that point.
Now on wound number C, or keep calling it number, wound C, did you reapproximate that wound as well, Dr. Thompson?
Yeah. Let me refer to my notes on that one. I did, yes.
So let me turn to that page, Dr. Thompson. Yes, on the right spot. And I'm gonna just try and point out here the reapproximation of the wound. Is that where you're referring to it, Dr. Thompson?
Yes.
Okay, and what did you reapproximate the wound to be or to look like?
When I reapproximated or stuck together the wound margins, it showed it suggested a pointed edge at the 3 o'clock position. So that would be, if you're looking at the wound on the screen, it would be the wound to the right of the screen would look like it had a pointed edge, and the wound at the opposite side or the 9 o'clock position looked like it had a squared edge.
And again, for purposes of what you're confident in saying about the instrument used to cause wound C, what is it that you would say?
I would say that it has a sharp edge to it.
Still on Roman numeral number 3, the associated findings there, Dr. Thompson, the blood and the tracheobronchial tree. What are you referring to there?
That's the airway. So the trachea is that little structure you feel in the front of your throat. And then the bronchi is a trachea, or the airway comes down. It branches into smaller little airways. Those are the bronchi. So there's just blood in that airway, and that's all secondary to the lung being injured.
That would have been the result of wound C.
Yes.
To that part of the body filling with blood,
Yes.
or Mr. Harlan's body, blood filling in there. Was there anything of note regarding wound C other than what you've already noted, Dr. Thompson?
No.
If we go to Roman numeral number 4, sharp force injury of anterior left arm. What kind of injury is that, Dr. Thompson, that you're referring to there?
That's also a sharp force injury. So again, an injury caused by a sharp edged instrument.
On the jury states exhibit number 37, a photograph of wound E. Is there anything that you can draw from that particular injury, Dr. Thompson, beyond what you've noted in your report?
No,
Is this a wound that you would have, that you reapproximated or not?
no.
And why would you not do that with this one?
It's too superficial, so it doesn't extend very deep into the body.
And Roman numeral number 5. Superficial sharp force injury of the posterior left forearm, wound F. What did you note about this particular sharp force injury, Dr. Thompson?
Just that it was very superficial, so it didn't extend very deep into the body, and that it was caused by a sharp edged instrument.
In states exhibit number 38, you're documenting wound F. Is there anything else of note to this particular injury other than what you've noted in your autopsy reporting findings, Dr. Thompson?
No.
Roman numeral number 6. You're gonna have to help me out. Hepatic steatosis. What is that, Dr. Thompson?
Hepatic steatosis is simply fatty change of the liver. So there was a lot of fat present within the liver. That's a natural disease finding.
And then Roman numeral number 7. Status post appendectomy remote. What is it that you refer to there, Dr. Thompson?
That means that the appendix had been taken out at some point in the past.
And then Roman numeral number 8. Bilateral fractures consistent with cardiopulmonary resuscitation. And what is it that you're referring to there, Dr. Thompson?
There were rib fractures at the time of autopsy that were associated with CPR. So chest compressions on the body very frequently causes rib fractures, especially in older people.
Now, specifically, if we go back to what was described as wound C and what you labeled as wound C, looking at states exhibit number 36, you indicated the depth of that particular wound to be 13 centimeters. Is there any way for you to know how long a bladed instrument or sharp force instrument would have been used to cause this particular injury?
No.
Could a bladed or sharp force injury be 3 centimeters?
That seems a little bit short. Certain parts of the body do have a so-called bendability to them. So if you get stabbed on the abdomen, your abdomen can compress such that a blade that's 3 centimeters in length might extend 6 or 7 centimeters in depth. And you probably get that in most parts of the body. You would probably get it less in the area of the chest because you have ribs there. And so your ribs, even though they can bend inward a little bit, probably don't have the ability to bend inward 12 centimeters. So your rib cage is not going to extend down to this point such that a 3 centimeter blade creates a 13 centimeter in length wound.
Do you have any opinion as to a minimum length of sharp force instrument that would have caused this particular injury?
Not really. I mean, obviously, the smaller and smaller you get, the less likely that blade is going to be able to cause that 13 centimeter in length wound. I wouldn't feel very comfortable saying 8 centimeters and greater is what it has to be, but just simply the further away from 13 centimeters you get, the less likely it would be.
So your internal and external examination of Mr. Harlan were completed.
Yes.
Were there any other findings of both external and internal that we haven't talked about so far, Dr. Thompson?
No.
And so when you complete both the internal and the external examination, is that when the toxicology part of the examination is done?
The toxicology is actually one of the drawing of the blood specimens for toxicology is one of the first things we do, but it's usually the last result we get back. And that's because we have to send it to a lab in Pennsylvania for testing. And it usually takes maybe 3 to 4 weeks before the test comes back.
And so the toxicology of Mr. Harlan's blood, that was done here, Dr. Thompson?
That was done in Pennsylvania.
But it was tested by the lab in Pennsylvania?
Yes.
I'm going to have you flip to that page of your report, Dr. Thompson, so we can discuss the findings from the toxicology. I believe I'm going to the front page of that particular part of the report. You correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Thompson, but is this the right page to begin that particular part of it?
Yes, that's the report we get back from NMS Labs in Pennsylvania.
And so then we go down to positive findings. Are those the findings that were made?
Yes.
So what does it show that was in Mr. Harlan's system?
It shows ethanol, which is the alcohol that we consume. That blood concentration is 0.201 grams per 100 milliliter. So for a reference, the legal limit of driving in Iowa is 0.08. So he's at 2.5 times that level. There's also something called amphetamine, which is a stimulant. So it excites the body. And that's in his body probably because he has the methamphetamine in his system, which is also a stimulant, or it also excites the body. So when your body breaks down methamphetamine, it breaks it down into amphetamine. So that's probably why the amphetamine is in his blood. And then we also do a urine drug screen. We typically don't get a level of drug when we do a urine screen, but the urine was presumptive positive for amphetamines. And so that's probably positive because of the methamphetamine. It's presumptively positive, which means it's probably or possibly positive because it's not confirmed. So they just do one test of it and it says that test is positive. They don't confirm it with a second type of test.
Were there any other findings as part of the toxicology of Mr. Harlan beyond what we just discussed, Dr. Thompson?
No.
And so once the examination or the autopsy is complete, what's your next step in this process that you go through, Dr. Thompson?
So after the autopsy is complete, then I will dictate my autopsy report. That usually will get transcribed within a few days. And then we will collect information from law enforcement officials, witnesses, if they're available. Next of kin, we always try to speak to the next of kin, the legal next of kin. We get hospital records. And then we review all that, and then the final part is simply certifying the death certificate, which includes the cause and manner of death.
And so do you put your opinion as to the cause and manner of death in your report?
I do, yes.
And did you do so in this case as well?
Yes, I did.
And if we flip to that particular portion of your report, Dr. Thompson, it's labeled opinion. And you indicate, in your opinion, this 48-year-old Native American male, William Harlan, died of multiple sharp force injuries. According to investigative reports on February 24, 2023, the decedent was stabbed multiple times. An individual called emergency services. The decedent was transported to a local hospital where medical intervention was performed. He died shortly after arrival. Autopsy demonstrated multiple sharp force injuries, the most significant of which was a stab wound of the anterior superior lateral left chest, which perforated the left lung and the aorta. Again, that's referring to wound C, Dr. Thompson, is that right?
Yes,
And associated with that wound pathway was blood within the left chest cavity, collapsed left lung, and blood within the tracheobronchial tree. Natural diseases included fatty charge of the liver, and toxicological analysis demonstrated the presence of ethanol, methamphetamine metabolite, amphetamine. And that's the opinion that you reached regarding the death of, or the cause of death for Mr. Harlan.
yes.
And regarding the manner of death, what was your conclusion as to the manner of death?
The manner of death would be homicide.
Now, the different manners of death, you indicated what those were: accidental, natural, homicide, undetermined. Was there another one?
Suicide.
Suicide. And so what's the definition when you say the manner of death is homicide? What does that mean?
That simply means death at the hands of another individual.
Now, one thing that I wanted to draw from you earlier, and I neglected to do so, Dr. Thompson, quickly, is that Mr. Harlan was obviously taken to the hospital for treatment before he died. And if we look at State's Exhibit 32, we talked about the different wounds that we see, A, B, and C. There's also a wound of some sort that we see at the bottom right-hand side on Mr. Harlan, bottom right-hand side of the photograph, the left side of his chest. What is that we see there in that photograph, Dr. Thompson?
That's called a thoracotomy incision. That's an incision that's created by the surgeon at the hospital. They knew that something in his body was injured. And so they make a large wound. It can be quite large, sometimes over 15 centimeters in length, so over 6 inches in length. And then oftentimes they simply look in there to see what's injured. Sometimes they can even stick their hand in there and they will manually pump the heart. So it's simply a medical intervention procedure. It's not any type of injury to the person.
So what we see there is nothing related to your findings as to cause or manner of death.
No.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson. The state has no further questions of this witness at this time.
Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Doctor, in your reports or anything that you gathered for Mr. Harlan, did you have anywhere in that information where when he was pronounced dead, what time?
I do. We have something called an ME1 report, which is an investigative report created by the county medical examiner. I think for this case, it was Dr. Quisenberry, who's a pathologist at St. Luke's Hospital. And then we also get the hospital records. In this case, it was Mercy, and he was pronounced dead at Mercy. I don't recall though the exact time.
Okay. Now, doctor, you answered questions about wounds A, B, and C. Is that right?
Yes,
And you were able to maybe I'll let you explain. How do you move the wound to be able to see what type of instrument might have been used? What do you call it?
I think you're referring to sticking the wound edges together.
Yes, sir.
I call that reapproximation of the edges.
And in looking at these, both wound A and C, when you did that, they came up with the same general shape, did they not?
Yes,
Okay, that being roughly flat on one side, sharp on the other, is that right?
yes.
When you do this, you're not trying to do it incorrectly to make something appear that's not real, is that right?
That's correct. I'm not trying to manipulate it so that it looks like a sharp edge and a squared edge.
Okay. Does it mean anything if more than one wound looks the same?
You know, potentially the more wounds that he had, if you had 20 sharp force injuries and you had 20 that had a squared edge and 20 that had a pointed edge, that would, shift the needle that more than would shift the needle that, a squared edge instrument could be a serious possibility.
Okay. So more is always better.
More is always better.
But in this case, there were only maybe 2 viable wounds to do that with.
Yes.
And then I wanted to, Your Honor, could I stand up for this? Of course. Doctor, you were describing Mr. Harlan, how when you note the direction of the wounds, that you were assuming that he was in an upright position.
Yes.
And so when you were describing wound A, so I would just like to see if this is approximating what you were describing, that someone comes from above and is coming straight down into the left side of his upper chest.
Yes, that's a possibility.
When you described it, what didn't you say was went up and down the wound?
Yes, top to bottom.
So that would be going top to bottom if he was in an upright position.
That's correct.
And was that also what you observed from wound B?
Yes, sir.
And then wound C would be more, for better term, left or right?
Yes.
Now, if someone had an injury to their lung, might they wheeze, have some trouble breathing?
Potentially, yes. I think they would be at least partially short of breath, where they might feel uncomfortable.
Now, you said you did some observations of just the skin of Mr. Harlan.
Yes,
Did you observe any injuries to his back?
can I refer to my notes?
Of course.
So there was no, so we're talking about the back of the torso, right? Not the back of the body.
Let's do both.
Okay. So technically, he did have an injury to the back of his forearm. So when you're in an anatomic position, you're standing up with your palms facing forward like this. So this would technically be the back of the forearm. So he did have an injury on the back of the forearm. If we're talking about the back, as most people refer to the back, he did not have any sharp force injuries there.
Did he have any blunt force trauma that you were able to see?
No, he had no blunt force trauma to the back. So no injuries to the back of the torso.
How about, did he have any injury to the back of his head?
No.
Thank you, doctor. I appreciate it.
Anything else, Mr. Loomis?
Dr. Thompson, just for purposes of clarification, when you say that you're not comfortable giving or rendering an opinion as to anything more than it was a sharp instrument that caused these wounds, what is it that you mean by that? Is it to a medical degree of certainty that you're making these opinions, or what do you mean by that specifically?
When I say the only thing I feel comfortable that it's a sharp-edged instrument that created it, that would be to a reasonable degree of medical certainty. So I wouldn't feel comfortable saying it has to be a knife with a single edge and a single point. I feel comfortable saying that it's simply an instrument that has a sharp edge to it.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Anything else, Mr. Loomis?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Your
Here
Honor.
go. Yes. Mr. Loomis, and you can get your next witness when you're ready.
Yes, the state calls Carissa Roach.
Sorry. Third, starting with 32. Yep. One side, it's my list. seat, make yourself comfortable and adjust that microphone as it seems appropriate, and I'll place you under. Okay, you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
I do.
And just for the sake of our record, tell us your name, please.
Carissa Roach.
All right, Mr. Loomis, when you're ready, you may begin.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Roach.
Good afternoon.
Ms. Roach, where is it that you're employed?
The Sioux City Police Department.
And what's your position with the Sioux City Police Department?
I'm the supervisor of the identification and property room.
Okay, and what is the identification?
The identification section is our unit that processes crime scenes. Our techs are now called CSIs or crime scene investigators.
And the property division of the department, what is that?
Our property room houses any evidence or property that's taken into the police department until it's either able to be released or used for court purposes.
And so how long have you been the manager of the ID department and the property department?
I've been with the police department for 17 years, but I've been the supervisor of those units for 9 years.
And prior to being supervisor, the 8 years prior to that, what was your role with the police department?
I was an identification technician, now called a crime scene investigator.
So can you give the jury an idea of your educational background that allows you to do what you do as a supervisor and a crime scene investigator?
So I have my bachelor's degree in chemistry from Morningside College and my master's degree in forensic science from Nebraska Wesleyan University in Lincoln, Nebraska.
And do you have any follow-up training or training specifically regarding crime scene investigation that you have done or participate in to continue to allow you to do what you do?
Yes, since I've worked on the job, we participate in several different types of conferences, different classes that pertain to different forensic techniques.
Do some of those classes entail processing items for latent fingerprints?
Yes, they have.
And when we refer to latent fingerprints, what are we talking about? Can you explain that to the jury?
So the term latent means not visible. So when fingerprints may be on a scene, they need to be made visible in some way. So they're called latent initially. And then once we make them visible, we either document that with photographs or by lifting those fingerprints or collecting that item and preserving the fingerprints.
And have you had training in that particular area?
Yes, I have.
Can you describe for the jury what that training is?
So since working with the police department, we process crime scenes every day and often are processing items for fingerprints in order to collect them and preserve them for any future analysis or testing. However, I've also attended training on that. I attended a correspondence course that pertains specifically to processing for fingerprints. Of course, I did touch on that in my education as well. And I also have attended a course that's specifically on obtaining evidence through chemicals and light treatment.
And did you have occasion to test any of the items that were collected or seized in this particular case?
Yes, I did.
And what item was that?
That was item 8, which was a knife.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
So your state's exhibit number 23, is that the item that you processed?
Yes, it is.
And now when you say you processed it for latent fingerprints, what is the process?
So there's several different processes you can use in order to make those latent fingerprints visible. In this case, I used what's called a RUVIS or the crime site imager. And RUVIS stands for reflected ultraviolet light. And it's a system that you can look at something for fingerprints without treating it in any fashion first. So it potentially can disturb future analysis for DNA and those types of things. If you use other chemical processes, this process preserves that so that you can potentially test it for DNA in the future.
And so this process is essentially looking at it with a special kind of light.
That's right. So it's a handheld unit that has different filters in it. And then you used a UV light source and shine that on the surface. And this unit will detect different ways that that light is reflected off the surface. So if there's fingerprints present, that will reflect the light differently than the surface without fingerprints. So you're able to visually see if there's any fingerprints present.
And that was the process that you used here. When you used that process on this particular knife, did you find anything?
I did not.
Now, before you conducted or performed your process on this particular knife for fingerprints, had it been analyzed by anybody else within the department before you did this part of the testing?
It had already been swabbed for possible blood prior to my analysis.
And is that a possible explanation for why there is nothing seen during your part of the testing or processing of it for latents?
That could potentially affect if there's fingerprints on the surface.
And so when you use that special light to go over the knife and didn't see anything, is your testing done? Do you do anything else after that?
I did not test it any further after that.
Did you have any further involvement with testing any of the other items in this case?
I did not do any analysis on any other items. I did take photographs of a few items.
Now, in this particular case, you're aware that there were certain items that were sent to the state lab for testing?
Yes.
Showing you state's exhibit number 16. Ms. Rhodes, are you familiar with state's exhibit number 16?
That is a lab report from our state lab in Ankeny, Iowa.
Have you seen this prior to today?
Yes, I have.
What we see in this particular report is a listing of items, a listing of some of the items that were sent by the police department to the state lab for testing. Is that right?
That's correct.
Now, there were some items that were collected from the apartment or seized from the apartment involved 414 11th Street apartment number 6 that were not sent to the lab for testing. Are you aware of that, Ms. Roach?
Yes, I am.
And it's my understanding that during the execution of the search warrant, that there was a drain cap from a shower that was collected and a sink trap from the bathroom sink that was collected. Are you familiar with that?
Yes,
And the decision was made not to send those particular items to the lab for testing. Is that right?
that's correct.
Can you help the jury understand the issues with sending items like that to the lab for testing, particularly as it relates to looking for DNA on those items?
So those particular items were not at the top of our list for submission. We are limited by the number of items that we can submit in our first submission to the state lab for analysis. So we have to really pick and choose which ones we think are most relevant to the details as we know them, the details of the crime. So in this case, those items in particular, because of where they're located in sink drains, there are lots of potential for things to interfere with analysis there. So for example, the sink drain, lots of people wash their hands with soap or perhaps brush their teeth and spit down those drains. So it's not to say that there's not necessarily DNA present, but the potential for there being contamination is really high in those locations.
And so while those items were collected, the decision was ultimately made not to send them for that reason due to potential contamination.
That's correct.
And when items are sent to the lab, you want there to be reliable results that are returned for the items that are sent.
That's correct.
And were you concerned that those would not be reliable if you send those kinds of items to be tested for DNA?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Roach. The state has no further questions for this witness at this time.
Cross-examination?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Roach. You're excused.
Thank you.
State's next witness?
The state calls Emily McNeil.
And Ms. McNeil, I'm just gonna have you raise your right hand. You swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth in this matter.
Yes, I do.
All right, fine, thank you. Would you state your name for us, please?
Emily McNeil.
Mr. Loomis, when you're ready, you can begin.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. McNeil.
Good afternoon.
Can you tell the jury where you're employed?
I'm employed at Sioux City Police Department as a crime scene investigator
And how long have you been employed with the Sioux City Police Department?
for approximately 1 year and 3 months.
And all in the crime scene investigation department?
Yes.
And can you tell the jury about your educational background that you have that allows you to do what you do with the police department?
Yes, I graduated from West Virginia University as a forensic examiner major with a bachelor's of science.
And then we're hired on with the Sioux City Police Department?
Yes,
Ms. McNeil, I'd like to direct your attention to February 24th of 2023. Were you working on that particular night?
yes, I was.
And on that particular night, were you called out to assist or process a scene at 414 11th Street here in Sioux City?
Yes, I was.
And that was for a stabbing that had taken place?
Yes,
Do you recall approximately what time it is that you were first called out for that?
it was approximately 10 p.m., but I just want to make sure and check my notes that I'm correct.
That would be fine if you want to check your notes, Ms. McNeil.
Thank you. Yes, approximately 2,200 hours, so 10.
And so when you get called out for this particular situation, where is it that you first respond or where is it that you first go?
I first go inside the apartment at that residence. And at that time, I was told the victim had been taken to the hospital, so I just went inside that apartment building.
Did you do anything inside the apartment building at that time?
I took photographs of the inside of the apartment.
taking overall photos of the main room, closet, kitchen area, and bathroom.
Okay, and this is apartment number 6 that we're referring to, Ms. McNeil?
Yes,
And your effort at this point in time is simply just to take overall photographs?
yes, I did not move anything or touch anything.
Okay, and was this at the request of whom?
It was at the request of the police officers at the scene.
Okay, and so approximately how long were you on scene at the apartment to take these general photographs?
It couldn't be more than 30 minutes.
And so after you take these particular photographs, again, you're just taking general photographs of the layout of the apartment. Generally describe the size of this apartment for the jury.
The apartment is one main room with a closet attached and a bathroom and kitchen on both doorways are on one side. And the room itself is about 12 by 12 feet.
Would you say it's a pretty small apartment
Yes,
with a pretty small kitchen and a pretty small bathroom?
yes.
And so after taking general photographs of the apartment, do you do anything else on the scene at 414 11th Street at that time?
No.
Where are you directed or asked to go next?
I am then directed to go to Mercy to take photographs of the victim to document his injuries and his current state.
And so did you do that?
I took what photographs I could. This was mostly photographs of his face and of his legs from a bit further away, but the medical were still working on him, so I could not take appropriate photographs.
And so after taking the photographs that you could take of Mr. Harlan, were you asked to go anywhere else after that?
I was then asked to go back to the station to photograph and swab the people that were with the victim at the time. 911 was called.
And those would be, who were those individuals that you would have done that with, Ms. McNeil?
Those would have been Nathaniel Parker III, Nathaniel Parker Jr., Conway Malone, and I believe that's it.
So that would be Conway Malone,
Yes,
Nathaniel Parker Jr.,
yes,
Nathaniel Parker III,
yes.
and was there another individual?
There may have been.
Was that Jeffrey Lee?
Yes. Sorry.
Now you're there to document these particular individuals, but what else are you doing at that time with them?
At that time, I would have swabbed any red stains that I found on them or their clothing, and I would have done buccal swabs, which are swabs of the inside of their mouths.
And the buccal swabs of the insides of their mouths, is that for purposes of collecting DNA from that person?
Yes, it is.
And you obtained those buccal swabs from the insides of their mouths for all 4 of these individuals?
I did, except for, I believe, Nathaniel Parker III. That was swabbed by a nurse.
Did you take photographs of Nathaniel Parker III while you were there?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and do you see that individual here this afternoon?
Yes, I do.
Can you identify him for the jury, please?
He's the man sitting over there with the red tie.
State would ask the record reflect that the witness has identified the defendant.
It will so reflect.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. McNeil, I'm going to hand you what the marked as state's exhibits number 80 through 83. Do you recognize these photographs?
Yes, I do.
Are these photographs that you took of the defendant?
Yes,
Took them that night, February 24th?
yes,
And are they fair and accurate as to how that night?
yes.
State would offer state's exhibits number 80 through 83 inclusive.
Any objection?
No objection to those, Your Honor.
80 through 83 inclusive are admitted.
So in State's Exhibit number 80. Photograph of the defendant, Mr. Parker. State's Exhibit number 81. A photograph of Mr. Parker's hands. And why is it that you want to document Mr. Parker's hands, Ms. McNeil?
I wanted to document the state in which he was taken to the station and also if there were any red stains or scratches or marks.
And then in State's Exhibit 82, the palms of the defendant's hands. And again, is that the same reasoning why you're taking photographs of the defendant's palms?
Yes,
And then State's Exhibit number 83. What are you documenting here specifically in State's Exhibit number 83?
it's hard to see in that screen. It's a little overexposed, but in the picture itself, you can see some red staining on his palm, which was presumed to be possible blood.
Give you this photograph, and it is starting to see the glare. Maybe if you can take this photograph and hold it up to the jury and kind of indicate with the finger the area that you're talking about on the defendant's palms.
You can see some red coloration right there. That is what I was mostly focusing on when photographing.
So you took the photograph of this particular part of the defendant's palm. Did you do anything else with what you see here or what you noted with this photograph and possibly blood on it?
I then swabbed it using 2 swabs and then placed it into a box and sealed it.
Was that swab later sent to the criminalistics laboratory for testing?
Yes,
And I believe you indicated at that time you also collected buccal swabs from Mr. Malone, Mr. Parker Jr., and Mr. Lee.
yes,
And were those items also sent to the laboratory for analysis?
yes.
Did you do anything else at the station at that point in time?
I do not believe so.
Was the investigation ongoing?
Yes,
And did you continue to remain there to assist with that investigation?
yes.
All right, so then after documenting and taking photographs at the station, what's the next involvement that you had in the investigation?
After that, I believe the car was found and I then went to the car as instructed and photographed the vehicle as well as took photographs of inside the vehicle.
Now, this particular vehicle, are we referring to the white Nissan Murano?
Yes,
And was it still out where it had been stopped by police officers?
yes,
Do you recall where that was approximately?
I do not.
Before taking the photographs of the white Nissan Murano, do you do any examination of the vehicle at all at that time?
Before photographing, I just do an overall look of the exterior and then photograph the exterior without touching anything. And then I will open the doors, look inside, photograph before touching, and then proceed inside to photograph what I can.
How long does that process take?
Not too long. It only takes about 20-25 minutes to do the overall photographs.
And it's my understanding, Ms. McNeil, that some of the processing of this white Nissan Murano took place on scene where the car had been stopped, but then was later towed to the station, secured in a bay for execution of a search warrant and further processing. Is that right?
Yes,
Okay. Were you involved in both of those parts of the examination of the car?
yes, I was.
State's Exhibit 71 and 72. Is this the white Nissan Murano that you would have examined and taken photographs of at the scene?
Yes.
And your state's exhibit 73 through 77.
Thank you.
Do you recognize those photographs?
Yes, I do.
Were those photographs taken at the White Summer on the
Yes,
at the scene of the stop?
yes.
State would offer state's exhibits 73 through 77 inclusive.
Any objection?
No objection.
73 through 74 inclusive are admitted.
Ms. McNeil, I'm going to show you state's exhibit number 73. And what are you documenting here in state's exhibit number 73?
I'm documenting the inside of the back of the vehicle before it had been touched by myself or other officers.
And in state's exhibit number 74. What are you documenting here in state's exhibit number 74?
I'm documenting the presence of a red stain that was visible before anything was done to the vehicle.
I'm going to hand you back state's exhibit number 74, Ms. McNeil, to help the jury understand the area of the car that you're referring to of the stain that you're trying to document in this particular photograph. If you could hold that up, that point where you're referring to.
Unfortunately, the coloration of the photograph did not turn out as accurate as it did with the human eye. These stains here are not actually as red as they are photographed. They were a brown color in person, and there's a light red stain that was here, which I then swabbed after photographing. However, they are not exactly visible in the photograph.
Well, if I put state's exhibit 74 back up on the screen. These particular areas that we see here, Ms. McNeil, those are not the areas that you're referring to that were swabbed. Is that right?
Correct. Those were actually a brown color in person.
And the area that you are documenting is more up here.
Yes.
And that particular area appeared to be what to you when you saw it with your eye?
It was a light smear of red.
And did you swab that?
I did.
And was that item also sent to the lab for testing?
Yes, it was.
State's exhibit number 75. What's being documented in state's exhibit 75?
It was just another perspective of the back of the vehicle inside before it had been touched or searched.
And that is from, excuse me, that's from the passenger side?
Yes, it is.
And state's exhibit number 76. Again, documenting the rear passenger seat of this particular car.
Yes, but this time from the driver's perspective side of the car.
And state's exhibit number 77. What are you documenting here in state's exhibit number 77?
There was more of a red stain on the interior of the middle seat, and I photographed the red coloration.
To help give some perspective of where this is. Is this the middle section of the back seat?
Yes, it is.
And so the back seat's kind of divided into 3 sections, I would say.
Yes,
And 77 is that middle section. Is that from the driver's side that we're looking at this photograph?
yes, it is.
And again, I'm gonna hand you this photograph if you can indicate to the jury the area that you're trying to document, since it might be a little hard to see on the envelope.
There's some brownish red here and brownish red as well here.
particular area, did you swap that particular area as well?
Yes, I did.
And that was sent to the lab for testing too?
Yes,
And the area that you were referring to or pointed to when you held the photograph, is that this area here?
yes, it is.
Did you document anything else in the vehicle at that particular time
While it was,
while it was there on scene after being stopped by patrol?
no, I did not.
Did you document anything else into the car after it was towed to the station?
Yes,
So you were involved in that part of it as well?
yes,
Did you take additional photographs of the car at that time?
yes, I did.
Is this, how much later into your shift are you when you go back and further take photographs and process this car after the search warrant is obtained?
After the search warrant was obtained, it wasn't much longer that I searched it. I was on an on-call basis at this time because of the weekend. I couldn't tell at what point in the night it was that I searched.
So some point later that night, you would have further processed it.
Yes,
And did you locate anything within the vehicle when you did it a second time?
yes.
And what is it that you located?
There was a knife in the center console.
Did you document that with photographs?
Yes,
Then you went to the marked State's Exhibit 78 and 79.
thank you.
Do you recognize what's documented there?
Yes, I do.
And what is
It is a silver knife, possibly a paring knife.
And the documentation of this particular knife, is this where the knife was located before it was moved?
Yes,
State would offer State's Exhibit 78 and 79.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
78 and 79 are admitted.
Showing you State's Exhibit number 78, Ms. McNeil. Is that how the knife appeared when you
yes,
first saw it in the car?
yes.
And did you see the knife in the car when it was out on the street before, or is this the first time that you had seen it?
Let me check my notes real quick. Apologize.
Yes, please do.
Yes, it was during the search warrant after it was brought to the station.
So you hadn't seen it before that point?
Correct.
And then 79, this is the knife. After it had been taken out and set down on the seat.
Yes,
Again, you state exhibit number 26. You recognize State's Exhibit number 26?
yes, I do.
Is that the knife? That's
Yes, it is.
State would offer State's Exhibit 6 as evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
26 is admitted.
Ms. McNeil, did you physically look at this knife after it was located in the car?
Yes, I did.
Did you see anything on this particular knife when you found it that would indicate the presence of blood on the knife?
No, I did not.
After you had documented the car on scene where it was when it was stopped, you did what you did there, documented it. Where did you go after that?
I then went to I believe I then went to the station because a search warrant for the house, the apartment was ready.
So did you head to the apartment or did you head back to the station first? Do you recall?
I do not.
Okay. At some point, did you make your way to the apartment to assist with the execution of the search warrant?
Yes,
Okay, or to document the execution of the search warrant?
yes.
Okay, and so before officers execute the search warrant, what is it that you do on scene there?
Before a search warrant is physically conducted, I take, again, overall photographs of the interior, making sure to document every room prior to being touched. And once I take those photos, searching then can then begin.
And so this is in addition to the photographs that you had taken earlier when you were first at the apartment?
Yes,
And you're just further documenting the different rooms and where things are within the apartment, but not touching or disturbing anything within the apartment?
correct.
And then after that is done, do the officers begin execution of the search warrant?
Yes, they did.
And so when that part of the process is taking place, what is it that you're doing then?
While they are searching, I remain still until they call for me. If they find something that they want documented and or collected, I will then photograph it before they move it too much, and then I will collect it into the proper packaging.
And is that how this worked that night when you were at the apartment?
Yes, it is.
Can you some more photograph, Mr. McNeil, states exhibits 48 through 64.
Thank
Do
you.
you recognize those photographs?
Yes, I do.
Are those photographs that you took as part of your involvement in the investigation in this particular case?
Yes, it is.
And did those photographs entail both the apartment and items collected from that apartment that night?
Yes,
They would offer states exhibit number 48 through 65 inclusive into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
48 through 65. I know that there's some numbers in between that have already been admitted, but to that extent will be over inclusive, but the rest of them are admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll show you states exhibit number 45, Mr. Neal. States exhibit number 45. Is this the apartment number 6?
yes, it is.
And this bathroom door, or this door that we see here, is this the door to the bathroom?
Yes, it is.
Was there anything on this particular bathroom door that was documented by you, whether on the outside or the inside of this door?
On the inside of the door facing the bathroom, there was a red smear.
And that was something that you documented with photographs?
Yes,
I'll show you state exhibit number 48. And this is on the inside of the door, is that right, Ms. McNeil?
yes, it is.
And the area that you're talking about, that you're documenting, is this stain here?
Yes,
States exhibit number 49. Another photograph of that same smear.
yes,
And states exhibit number 50, a closer up shot of that same smear.
yes.
Did that appear to be blood to you?
It was red, a reddish brown color, and was presumed to possibly be blood. Yes,
And so in addition to taking photographs of this particular door with the smear on it, did you also swab this particular area?
yes, I did.
And was this something that was sent to the lab for testing as well?
Yes, it was.
Show you states exhibit number 51. Documenting the bathroom in this particular apartment.
Yes, I am.
Now, in State's Exhibit number 54, you're documenting the ceiling within the bathroom. Is that right, Mr. Neal?
Yes,
This tile that we see up here in State's Exhibit number 54, this particular photograph and how this looked, was this taken before the officers executed the search warrant?
yes, it was.
And to your knowledge, what was located, if anything, up inside the tile of this particular bathroom?
There was a knife with a red shirt found above the ceiling tiles.
And does State's Exhibit 55 document where that was found?
Yes, it does.
And State's Exhibit number 56, is that document after the item had been removed from the bathroom ceiling tile?
Yes,
And State's Exhibit number 57, does that document the item after the shirt had been unwrapped?
yes.
Now, while you were on scene, did you physically examine either of these two items, the knife or the T-shirt?
I did a visual inspection, but I did not pick them up until we returned to the station.
What, if anything, did you notice visually of either the knife or the T-shirt while you were at the apartment?
The T-shirt had a deep red stained area on the red shirt that was a different color from the actual shirt itself. And the knife had some slight red areas on the blade.
But that was the most that you did with the examination at that particular time?
Yes,
Did you document the knife and the T-shirt later at the station?
yes,
Did you look more closely at those items at the station?
yes. At the station, I physically picked them up and held them.
And what, if anything, did you note when you did that at the station?
The shirt was cold and damp.
Was there anything about the knife that you noticed that you hadn't noticed while it was in the apartment?
There were more red stains than I thought at first, near the tip of the blade and also at the base of the blade.
Did you photograph the knife and the T-shirt again at the station?
Yes, I did.
State's Exhibit number 58. Is that just the knife that you're documenting?
Yes, it is.
And State's Exhibit number 59. The same picture of that knife with a ruler on it.
Yes,
Is that just done in order to have an understanding of the length of the blade?
yes, it is.
And in State's Exhibit number 60, what is it that you're attempting to document with a closer up view of this particular knife?
I'm attempting to document the reddish brown stains near the base of the blade.
And that was something that you visually observed on the knife that night?
Yes,
State's Exhibit number 61. What are you documenting in State's Exhibit number 61?
I was attempting to document more red stains found near the tip of the blade.
And is that again the same for State's Exhibit number 62?
Yes,
And then State's Exhibit number 63. You're just documenting the red T-shirt and the knife set next to each other.
yes, as well as the darker red stain on the shirt.
And State's Exhibit number 64. Another picture documenting the red stain on the T-shirt.
Yes,
And again, in State's Exhibit number 65. Documenting that red stain on the T-shirt.
yes,
Exhibit number 22. Is this the T-shirt that was collected from the bathroom?
yes,
Now, are there other items and other photographs that you would have taken within the apartment that you would have documented that particular night during the execution of the search warrant?
Yes,
It's my understanding that another knife would have been located in the closet of that particular apartment. Is that right?
yes,
Would that be state's exhibit number 24? And that you,
yes,
and state's exhibit number 25, was this particular knife also located in the apartment during the execution of the search warrant?
yes, it was.
And you documented that with photographs?
Yes,
State's exhibit number 25 was located in a gray purse on a couch within that apartment?
yes,
Now, while you were at the apartment, were there any coats or jackets that were documented while you were there that particular night?
yes, there were a couple.
And was one of those jackets a dark brown jacket with a fur collar on it?
Yes,
Would that be what shown? There is state's exhibit number 31.
yes,
Did you physically examine state's exhibit number 31?
yes, I did.
And what, if anything, did you know when you examined that particular jacket?
There was a red stain on the jacket.
And was the jacket ultimately sent for the lab for testing?
I believe so, yes.
Did you, when you say that you examined the jacket, were you just examining the outside of the jacket, or how did you examine the jacket?
I only examined the outside at the time.
Did you examine it at any time later anywhere else?
I did a small visual examination, but I did not go into detail.
Now, in addition to documenting what was inside the apartment that particular night, apartment number 6, did you document any other areas of this particular scene that night?
I documented the bathroom, kitchen, main living space, and closet during the search warrant, but prior to the search warrant, I had documented the outside.
And so at what point in the timeline did you do the outside of the apartment?
The outside of the apartment was early on. It was just after I had photographed the victim while he was still alive. I'd gone to Mercy, realized I couldn't photograph as I wished, and then before going back to the station, I went to the outside of the apartment complex.
And did you document that area as well with photographs?
Yes, I did.
Mr. Loomis, how much more do you think you might have?
I've got a ways to go further, Your Honor.
That's fine.
Okay,
And then I don't know whether you had a cross-examination. Why don't we wrap it up for today and we know where we've,
that's fine, Your Honor.
this is a good transition point. So I'm just gonna go ahead and let you go. You can check with Mr. Loomis about time for tomorrow, but counsel, come here just a minute. So I want to be able to.
Yeah, sure.
just checking, it's possible that we won't be done. So, no, I didn't say that at the beginning, so I'm gonna ask you that now. If you would be available Monday, or if there's anybody that comes to it Monday. I have a couple of minutes, maybe, and that's one of the reasons why we did this. We try our best to guess. Does anybody know that they have a conflict with Monday? That if you can get worked out, if we need you here Monday? Okay, good. Well, I'll know more tomorrow, but I was just trying to figure this all out. I want you to keep in mind the administration. Have you come back just like we did this morning? Be back here about 10 to 9, so we can start soon after that. And we'll be back at it tomorrow. Okay, thank you. All I have to do for the day. Well, One of the which is your weather record, any objections to 103 being admitted, Mr. Lewis? Oh, yeah. Okay, so remind me tomorrow, Mr. Folks, that we at least and tell the juror 103 was offered after the 11th. Just so that we're clear and that they understand we did those business act. Have you hang on to that? Okay, so we're done for today. We'll see you in the morning.